Honestly, you'd be better off without her. My sister Mallory set it across the dining table at our parents' house on Valentine's Day, smiling the kind of smile she used on event clients when she wanted them to think she cared. My fiancé Daniel didn't lift his fork. My mother folded her napkin into a perfect triangle. My father reached for his sweet tea like nothing had happened. The candles were lit. The roast was sliced. The serving dish was still steaming. I set my fork down at exactly the same angle as the knife. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't get up. What Mallory didn't know was that Daniel had been showing me every single message she'd sent him for almost 2 years. What my parents didn't know was that my mother had already given herself away in November. What none of them knew was that, in 30 days, the rehearsal dinner would have its own surprise guest list, and not a single one of them would be holding a wine glass when the screen came on. If this story is already hitting you in the chest, please take a second to like and subscribe. It helps the channel reach more people who have lived inside a quiet family like this one. Drop your city and your local time in the comments below. I love knowing where in the world you are when you listen to these. I'm Aurelia, 31. And this is the story of how my older sister tried to break the same woman twice, and what my fiancé did with one comment under a Facebook post that made my phone explode with 119 missed calls before sunrise. Let me take you back 2.5 years to a community playground in Hampton Park. I grew up on a street in Charleston where the live oaks kept the sidewalk dark even in July. We were the Bellamys. My father, Martin, retired from the Charleston Naval Yard as a logistics officer. He still wore polished shoes to the grocery store. My mother, Beverly, taught piano in our sunroom for 32 years, until her hands started cramping in the cold months. My older sister, Mallory, was 4 years ahead of me. The kind of older sister who could carry off a Navy headband at age 6 and tell our piano students they were ready for recital when they weren't. I was the easy one. That was how the family described me. Mallory was the difficult one, the brilliant one, the one whose feelings had to be handled carefully. I was the one who could be reasoned with. The first time I heard my mother say it out loud, I was 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen island while she pinned an apron pocket. Mallory had broken my new Polaroid for the 3rd time. I had asked gently if she could be careful next time. My mother had cupped my chin and said, "Honey, your sister has a hard time with her feelings. You're easy. Be easy." I learned the lesson the way kids learn breathing. By the time I was 31, I lived in a small brick townhouse on Cannon Street, with a single magnolia in the back patio, and a kitchen that smelled like coffee from the morning to the night. I was the program director at the Low Country Bright Minds Foundation, a nonprofit that funded sensory-friendly classrooms in Charleston County's public elementaries. Most of my days I spent in meetings with school principals, project contractors, and the parents of children who had been overlooked by every other system in the building. I loved my job. I loved the families. I loved the smell of crayon on hot vinyl. I met Daniel Knox in August of 2023. He was the landscape architect the foundation had hired to design a sensory playground for our flagship school on a small parcel adjacent to Hampton Park. He showed up to the site visit in dark jeans, a clean white shirt, and a roll of drawings under his arm. He shook my hand and asked before he asked anything else, "What does the loudest swing in your current playground sound like to a child with sensory regulation issues?" He didn't smile when he asked it. He just wanted to know. He was 31 then. He had grown up outside Greenville. He had 2 younger sisters and a quiet, watchful mother named Joanna. He drove an old green truck with a coffee thermos in the cup holder that never came out. He was a partner at a small studio in West Ashley called Cypress and Stone. He listened more than he talked, and when he talked, every sentence had a reason. On our first date in early October of 2023, at a coffee place on King Street, he told me he had been engaged once at 26 to a girl who had cheated on him with his best man. He said it without bitterness. He said it the way other people say what neighborhood they grew up in. I told him about Caleb that night, not the details, just the shape of it. He listened. He nodded. He didn't try to fix it. He paid the check and walked me back to my car and said, "I'd like to see you again, if that's okay." I let him kiss me on the 3rd date, outside a wine bar on East Bay. I told my mother about him on the 4th. I held my breath on the call. She said, "How nice. Does he have a real job?" I said, "He's a landscape architect." She said, "Just be sure he can take care of you, sweet girl." I changed the subject to her garden. I did not tell my sister about him for another 2 months, because I did not yet know why I did not want to. I had learned long ago to listen to the small instinct that told me to hold something close. I had not, however, learned to trust it. Within 6 months, he had met my parents. Within 8, my sister was texting him at 11:53 at night. I want you to understand why I trusted my family longer than I should have. To do that, I have to tell you about Caleb Mercer. I met Caleb in the fall of my senior year at the College of Charleston. I was 21. He was 23, finishing a master's in finance at the same campus. We met in an elective called Sociology of Family Systems, which the universe must have designed for us specifically. He sat 2 rows in front of me on the first day, turned around, and asked if I had a spare pencil. I did. He never gave it back. He was tall and quiet in a way that didn't ask for attention. He grew up in Beaufort. His father was a shrimp boat captain, and his mother taught 4th grade. He had the kind of integrity that doesn't perform, the kind that just shows up. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. I remember every meal he cooked me in our tiny apartment in Mount Pleasant. I remember the way he kissed my forehead when I came home tired from the foundation. I remember the way he listened when I told him things about Mallory I didn't even understand were wrong yet. He proposed at Folly Beach at sunrise in August of 2019. I was 24. He had a little velvet box that he had hidden in the cooler because he was worried I would feel the lump in his jacket and ruin it. He said, "I want to spend a long, ordinary life with you." I said yes before he finished the sentence. We started planning the wedding for the following summer. We were going to do it small. My mother wanted bigger. My father wanted Mallory in the wedding party. Mallory, who had broken up with her boyfriend a few months earlier, volunteered immediately to help plan. She arrived at every fitting. She drove me to every venue tour. She told my caterer she could negotiate a better quote. She was so present, so available, so eager that for the first time in my life, I thought maybe my sister and I had finally turned a corner. Then, sometime in late 2020, I can place it because my mother had started using her Christmas dishes early. Small things began happening between Caleb and me. He would go quiet when I came into the room. He would check his phone and then put it face down. One night, I found him sitting in the dark in the kitchen with a glass of water and his shoes still on. I asked him what was wrong. He said, "Nothing. I just had a long day." He had not, in fact, had a long day. He had spent the afternoon at a coffee shop with someone I did not yet know how to ask about. In June of 2021, he called me at work. He said, "I can't do this anymore." His voice was steady the way you sound when you are gripping the steering wheel. I asked him what he meant. I asked him if I had done something. I asked him if he had met someone. He said only one thing more. He said, "Please don't ask me to explain. I won't be able to." Then he hung up. He moved out of our apartment that weekend while I was at my mother's house being told to let him go and not be needy about it. Within a month, he had blocked me on every platform. He did not return a single message. He simply went silent. He never told me why. I was 26 years old. I had just signed a wedding venue contract. I had a dress hanging in the closet behind my college diploma. I had been counting down to August. And then there was no August. There was only the apartment with his side of the closet emptied out and the smell of his shampoo fading from the towel by the sink. I packed the dress into a plastic bag and pushed it into the attic. I did not cry. I did not call my friends. I called my mother. I asked her if I could come home for a few days. She said yes, and she made me a grilled cheese sandwich. And she sat across from me at the kitchen island where, 23 years earlier, she had cupped my chin and told me to be easy. And she said, "Honey, he probably realized something about you that nobody had the heart to tell you. That's not the worst thing in the world." She meant it tenderly. That made it worse. I left the next morning. I drove back to Charleston with my hands at 10 and 2. I parked outside my townhouse on Cannon Street and sat in the driver's seat for 45 minutes before I could go inside. When I finally opened my door, I knew something I would not understand for years. My family had a stake in this breakup somehow. I just didn't know what it was. I just knew the shape of it. The way you can tell a tooth is going to abscess weeks before it does. I spent the next 5 years pretending I had not noticed. Those 2 years between Caleb leaving and Daniel arriving are the part of this story I don't tell often. They are the part I have to tell now because if you don't understand what shape I was in, you won't understand why I let things happen later. I did not leave my townhouse for a full week after Caleb's phone call. My friend, Whitney Lang, we had been in the same foundation training the year before, drove over with a casserole and let herself in with the key under the planter. She didn't ask me anything. She heated up the casserole, put a plate in front of me, and said, "Eat what you can. Sleep when you can. You don't have to do anything else today." She came over for the next 11 days in a row. She was the only person I let inside. I quit Instagram. I quit Facebook. I did not respond to my college friends, my foundation colleagues, my distant cousins, or the polite condolence card my mother's church group sent. I gained 12 pounds in 3 months from numb eating. I started staying after work because the office at the foundation was easier to sit in than the empty townhouse. I drove out to Folly Beach one afternoon in October just to see if I could, and ended up turning around in the parking lot and driving home. I could not get out of the car. My sister Mallory was, on the outside, a model of sisterly support. She brought me iced coffees and called me sweet girl, and told me that what I was going through was the kind of thing only women like us can really survive. She told me repeatedly that I had chosen the wrong man and that it was not my fault. She said that Caleb was broken in ways I had been protecting me from for a while. She said it with her eyes wet. She said it with a hand on my forearm. She said it so many times that even now, when I close my eyes, I can hear the exact intonation of broken in ways. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Hadley in early 2022. He was the first stranger in my life who asked me a question my family hadn't trained me to deflect. When you imagine your sister at your wedding, what do you see? I cried for 40 minutes. I didn't know why. Sometime in early 2023, I started to lift, the way a body finally lifts when it has been underwater too long. I started running a sensory regulation pilot at one of the Foundation's flagship schools, and the work pulled me forward. The Foundation's board promoted me to program director in February of 2023. I bought a new mattress and donated the old one. I cleaned out the closet that had still smelled, faintly, of Caleb's shampoo. I put the wedding dress in its plastic bag on the curb the next bulk trash day. I did not look back at the truck. Then, on the 17th of August, 2023, I walked across the grass at Hampton Park to meet the new landscape architect the board had hired for the sensory playground. He was leaning against the chain-link fence near the dilapidated swing set. He was reading a small notebook. He looked up. He extended his hand. He said, "Aurelia, I'm Daniel." I shook his hand and felt nothing extraordinary. And that was the most extraordinary thing about it. For the first time in years, I had met a man who didn't make every cell in me brace. He asked me his question about the swing. I answered it. We walked the perimeter of the play area together. I told him my foundation's vision. He sketched ideas in his small notebook in real time, neat block letters, no flourish. When we got back to the entrance, he said, "If you ever want a coffee to talk about the bigger picture for the foundation, I'd be happy to listen." I said yes. He emailed me 3 days later with 2 openings in his calendar. I picked the second one. That was the start of Daniel. I won't pretend my family welcomed Daniel right away. They did not. They did not dislike him. They did something subtler. They observed. For our first Christmas as a couple, December of 2023, 2 months after our first date, Daniel came with me to my parents' house on Trad Street. He brought a bottle of bourbon for my father, a tin of pecans for my mother, and a small box of olive oil soap for Mallory. He had asked me in advance what each of them liked. He took notes. He did not need to be told twice. My father shook his hand, looked him in the eye, and said, "Landscape architect. That a real career?" Daniel said, "Yes, sir. We design public spaces. The foundation hired me to redo a school playground. My father grunted. My mother told Daniel he was very polite for an out-of-town boy. Mallory hugged him for one beat longer than was natural, told him she had heard so many wonderful things, and slipped him a card with her phone number on it, calling it a sisterly precaution if you ever need to know what kind of family you're getting into. She laughed when she said it. Daniel handed me the card later in my car. He didn't laugh. On the night of March 28th, 2024, at 11:53 p.m., Daniel's phone buzzed on his kitchen counter. He showed me the screen at 11:55. It was from Mallory. It said, "I just want my sister's man to know I'm cheering for you. You have a kind face. Don't let anyone tell you who to love." I sat very still. Daniel said, "Do you want me to answer?" I said, "No, please don't. Screenshot it. I'll talk to her." I did talk to her. I called her the next morning. I said gently, "Mal, please don't text Daniel late at night. It made him uncomfortable." She gasped. She told me I was misunderstanding. She said she was just trying to be welcoming. She said, "Aurelia, honey, are you sure you're not still healing from Caleb? Are you sure you're not seeing things that aren't there?" I held the phone away from my ear for a second. Then I said, "Just please no more late-night texts." She agreed. She also kept texting. In June of 2024, Mallory pulled into Daniel's driveway in the West Ashley neighborhood on a Sunday afternoon while I was at the foundation. She had a Pyrex dish of peach cobbler. She was wearing a dress she had not worn to a family event in years. Daniel did not invite her in. He stood on his porch. He took the dish through the doorframe. He said, "Thank you, Mallory. Aurelia's at work. Have a good Sunday." She lingered. She asked if she could come in for a glass of water. He said, "I'm about to head out. Drive safe." He shut the door. He called me from his porch as she pulled out. He told me before the cobbler had even cooled. We made a folder on Google Drive that night. He named it M-Logs. I edited the name to _Mallory_logs because I am a project director, and I like consistent file naming. We started saving everything. Every text screenshot, every receipt of unplanned drop-bys, every voicemail, every Instagram story where she tagged Daniel before tagging me, every birthday card she gave him with a personal note that did not include me. By the time we passed the 1-year mark of dating, in October of 2024, the folder had 312 files. Daniel had answered every single text from her with 2 words or fewer. "Thanks. Okay, we're good," and never initiated. I had watched him do this in real time on every device he owned. The man I was about to marry never gave my sister a single sentence she could quote out of context. That fact, more than any document we ever produced, is what saved us. He told me in November of 2024, on the couch in his living room, in a voice that was lower and slower than usual, "Aurelia, I want you to know, whatever happens between you and your family, I'm with you on this. I'm not going to drift. I'm not going to confuse myself. I am with you." He said it the same way other people say what neighborhood they grew up in. He meant it as a fact. I cried, not from sadness, from relief. Once Daniel and I had decided what we were doing, we got organized. We were not building a case. We were not planning a confrontation. We were doing what people do when a slow leak starts in a house. We were marking the water line and watching where it moved. In September of 2024, we instituted what we privately called the soft boundary. We reduced our monthly family dinners with the Bellamys from weekly to bi-monthly. We declined 2 invitations from Mallory to girls' nights that included Daniel as a surprise tag-along. When my mother asked why we had been so quiet lately, I said, "Daniel and I are protecting our nervous systems before the wedding." My mother said, "Sweet girl, your sister is just trying to be involved." By November, Mallory's texts to Daniel had moved from once a week to 2 or 3 per day. The content had shifted too. They had stopped being friendly and started being maudlin. She wrote to him at 1:20 in the morning. She wrote things like, "I know we shouldn't talk like this, but I trust you with my heart in a way I haven't with anyone in a long time." She wrote, "I think there are moments my sister doesn't see you the way you deserve to be seen." She wrote in February of 2025, just 1 week before Daniel proposed to me at Hampton Park, "You're the only person in my whole family who has ever asked me how I really am. Please don't forget that." Daniel never replied to any of them. He showed me each one inside of an hour. On the morning of March 23rd, 2025, Daniel proposed to me at the sensory playground he had designed. He had asked the school principal in advance for permission to be there alone for 15 minutes before the kids arrived. He led me to the elevated platform he had nicknamed the Lighthouse because it had a view of the park and the live oaks. He took my hand. He said, "I'd like a long, ordinary life with you. Will you marry me?" I said yes before he finished. We were both crying. I noticed even then that he didn't post the photos to any social media account. He sent them to my phone and to Whitney's phone. Then he turned off his notifications. By the time I had a ring on my finger, the Mallory Logs folder had 490 files. 312 of them were variants on "you'd be better off without her." The exact phrase, or a phrase 90% like it, sent to my fiancé across 18 months. 53 of them were the kind of letter you do not send a friend's husband-to-be. Daniel had not read past the 3rd sentence on any of those 53. He had screenshotted them and dropped them into the folder. In May of 2025, we asked Mallory to meet us in our living room. We did not invite my parents. Daniel made coffee. I poured. We sat across from her. I said, "Mal, we're getting married next year. I need you to stop messaging Daniel. We can be a family together, but only if this stops." I did not raise my voice. I did not list the messages. I did not show her the folder. I gave her a clean exit. She said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "I cannot believe you are doing this to me." She said, "Aurelia, I am your sister. I love you. Are you really going to choose him over me?" Then she pulled out her phone and started filming. She walked toward our kitchen door, narrating that she had come over to support her sister's wedding planning and was being attacked and accused by a man she had only ever shown kindness to. She uploaded a 30-second cut of that video to her Instagram story 3 minutes later. The caption read, "Praying for my sister tonight. Family is so hard." Daniel watched it on his phone while she was still standing in our kitchen, asking if anyone wanted a glass of water. She left. Daniel and I sat in the living room. We didn't speak for a long time. Finally, I said, "She's not going to stop." Daniel said, "No, she's not." I said, "And my parents are not going to step in." Daniel said, "No, they're not." I said, "Then we have to be very patient and we have to be ready." He nodded. He took my hand. We sat there until the coffee went cold. I want to tell you what changed in me that summer, because I think it's the most important thing I'll say in this whole story. In June of 2025, I started sleeping badly. Not because of Mallory's video, not because of my mother's voicemail asking why I had broken Mallory's heart. It was something underneath those things, a quieter shape pressing up from beneath. I would wake at 3 a.m. with a sentence in my head that I could not finish. She did this to who? She did this to what? On the third such night, I sat at my kitchen island in the dark, the way Caleb had sat the night he went quiet 5 years earlier, and I started scrolling through old photos. I went back to 2020, my engagement year. There were Facebook-tagged shots from family gatherings I barely remembered. There was the 4th of July barbecue at my parents' house. There were Christmas cookies. There was the Low Country Wine and Food Festival my mother had insisted Mallory attend to keep her busy. In photograph after photograph, Mallory was seated next to Caleb. At the cookout, at the dining table, at the festival. In one shot, she was leaning into his shoulder, laughing. In another, his hand was on her forearm, in a way I had told myself at the time must have been a friendly steady. I had stopped thinking about it. I had stopped letting myself see it, because seeing it would have meant a thing I was not ready to know. I called Caleb on the morning of September the 9th, 2025. He had moved to Atlanta. He had married a kindergarten teacher and had a daughter. I had found his number through a mutual friend from college who had asked me 3 times whether I was sure. I had said yes 3 times. He picked up on the 3rd ring. He said, "Aurelia." I said, "I just need to ask you one thing. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking you to apologize. I just need to ask you one thing." He waited. I said, "Was it Mallory?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that I had been carrying inside my body. Without knowing I was carrying it for 5 years. He said, "I'm so sorry, Aurelia." He told me over the next hour that in the spring of 2021, he had begun receiving text messages from a number that was not mine. The messages had pretended to be from me. They had said things he had not believed at first, and then things he had not been able to unsee. There had been a photo of me, edited with another man. There had been a paragraph he could not bring himself to recite out loud even now. He told me that one night, late, my sister had called him to talk about it as my family, and that what she had said in that call about my mental state, about my patterns, about a fictional infidelity she had covered for, had pushed him over an edge he had been balancing on for 3 months. He had broken the engagement 2 days later. He had not been able to call me back because every time he had thought about my voice, he had thought of her voice instead. He had moved on by going dark. He had not called me back because by the time he understood he had been played, he was already engaged to someone else. He had not wanted to come back into my life and break a second one. I let him cry. I let myself cry. Then I said, "Caleb, I'm going to ask you for one thing, and you can say no." He said, "Anything." I said, "If my fiancé and I need you to confirm what you just told me to one person in private or to a small room at a rehearsal dinner or to a camera, would you say yes?" He said, "Yes, whatever you need." "I should have come back 5 years ago. I will come back now." I hung up. I drove to Daniel's office at Cypress and Stone. I walked into his glass conference room while he was on a Zoom call. He took one look at my face, told the screen, "I'm going to have to call you back," and closed the laptop. I sat down across from him and I told him everything Caleb had said. He listened. He did not interrupt. When I was finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Aurelia, 2 engagements, same person, same playbook." He said it like a verdict. I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, we move." He said it the same way other people say what neighborhood they grew up in. Before I keep going, if this story has ever felt like one you've lived next door to, can I ask you to do me a favor in the comments? Have you ever caught a family member quietly tearing down your relationship and only realized years later, when it was almost too late? Drop your prediction below. What do you think my fiancé did with that 5-year-old confession? I read every guess. I'll tell you in the next breath whether you were right. The first thing Daniel and I did when we walked back into my townhouse that night was tell Whitney Lang. We could not do this alone, and Whitney was the only friend I had who knew the entire history. She had brought the casserole the week Caleb left. She was going to photograph my wedding. She was, in her real life, a wedding photographer with a sharp eye for the kind of detail other people miss. We sat on my living room rug for 4 hours with our laptops, 3 cups of tea, and a printer. Whitney was the one who found the alt account. She did the work over 4 nights, the way only a photographer can do that work, by reverse image searching the photos we knew Mallory had taken at family events. The trail led to an Instagram account with the handle at lowcountry_sand_dollar_, set to private with 12 followers. We requested access from a burner account. We were accepted in 11 minutes. The account had been active for 14 months. The grid was every photo of Daniel that Mallory had ever taken. There were 37 of them. The pinned highlight reel was called simply K for Knox. The captions were quotations from songs and from a romance novel I would later look up. The phone wallpaper in one of Mallory's selfies, taken at a beach that I recognized as Sullivan's Island, was Daniel's headshot from his Cypress and Stone bio page. She had blown it up. She had cropped his jaw. She had set it as her lock screen. I did not throw up. I came close. Whitney saved every screenshot to a thumb drive, with redundant copies on 2 of her cloud drives. Daniel built a clean, simple timeline document, 16 pages, that walked any reasonable adult from the first text in March of 2024 to the last text in February of 2026. He printed 3 binders. He drove them to Whitney's house. He drove the 3rd to Joanna Knox, his mother, who lived an hour north, and who would arrive in Charleston for the rehearsal weekend. In late November of 2025, I received the message I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it. It was from my mother. A single photo, sent at 6:53 in the morning with no text attached. A random picture, probably an accidental tap, but clear enough to see Mallory's iPhone in the frame, its lock screen lit up, and the wallpaper was Daniel. It took me 3 seconds to recognize the photo. It had been taken earlier that year, one of the times I had brought him home. Daniel was standing beside me in it, or he had been. I had been cropped out of the frame. Only he remained, as if I had never been there at all. Across Mallory's locked screen, a sentence had been typed over the image, clear enough to read. Sometimes the right person is right under your sister's roof. I didn't text back. I just sat there staring at that picture long enough to understand that if I blinked, it might disappear. Then I took a screenshot. Right after I captured it, my mother unsent the photo. 1 minute later, she texted, "Honey, are you awake?" I remember that what I felt in that moment didn't feel like anger. Not exactly. It was colder than that. Like someone had opened a door inside my chest and let winter air rush straight through. My mother had seen it. She knew what she had just sent. And in that brief, terrible moment, I understood that she had no idea what to do with it except pretend nothing had happened. 5 minutes later, I texted back, "What happened, Mom?" She replied almost immediately, "Nothing, sweetheart. I just wanted to check on you." I did not respond. I put the screenshot into the _Mallory_logs folder. I labeled the file Beverly _November_2025_ screenshot. I sent it to Daniel. I sent it to Whitney. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee and I sat with my hands wrapped around the mug for a long time. That was the day I understood what was going to happen at the rehearsal dinner. I had been carrying it as a question. After my mother's silent screenshot, it became a plan. I told Daniel that night. I said, "We are going to go to Valentine's Day at my parents' house. We are going to behave normally. We are going to give my sister the chance to do whatever she is going to do. We are not going to provoke her. We are going to wait for her to walk into the room with her own knife." He said, "Okay." He said, if she actually says anything out loud in front of your parents, I'm going to keep my fork in my hand." I said, "Yes, don't react." He said, "What surprises you isn't going to be that she says it. The surprise is going to be who doesn't speak up." That was the line I would carry into my parents' dining room on the 14th of February, 2026. That was the line I would still be carrying when my sister, smiling at my fiancé across the bowl of mashed potatoes, said, "Honestly, you'd be better off without her." That was the line I was carrying when my parents looked down at their plates. I drove home from my parents' house that Valentine's Day evening in absolute silence. Daniel sat beside me with his hand on my knee. He did not turn on the radio. I did not look at the dashboard. When I pulled into the alley behind the Cannon Street townhouse, I shut off the car and we sat there for nearly 10 minutes before either of us moved. Inside, I sat at my kitchen island. Daniel made me tea. I did not drink it. I opened my phone, typed 3 identical messages, and sent them to my mother, my father, and Mallory. The messages read, "I need space. I'm not going to be in contact for a while. Please respect that. Aurelia." I turned the phone face down and walked away from it. I canceled brunch with my mother the next day. I forwarded the venue's seating chart to Whitney with a single instruction. Pull all 3 Bellamy entries from the rehearsal dinner. Receipt as needed. I emailed Reverend Otis Calloway from our family church and asked him to please pass any messages from my parents through him. I sent the Reverend the cleanest summary of events I could write at 3 in the morning. He replied at 6. He said, "Aurelia, my child, I have been concerned for a long time. I will help you in any way I can. I will not be helping them lie to you." By the 17th of February, I had sent that summary to no one else. I had not posted anything. I had not even told my coworkers. I had only told Daniel Whitney, the Reverend, and Daniel's mother, Joanna. On the morning of the 18th, my mother posted a photograph of a sweetgrass basket on her Facebook page. The caption read, "It is the deepest grief a mother can know. To plan to share your only daughter's wedding day and to be told you are not welcome. We don't know what we did wrong. We will pray for healing." She tagged my father. She tagged Mallory. The post was set to public. It was shared 72 times in 48 hours. On the 19th, Mallory posted her own. It included 3 photographs of me as a child. The caption read, "The hardest part of being someone's older sister is loving them more than you love yourself, even when they tell you you are not allowed at their wedding. To my baby sister, I will be here when you come back. I forgive you in advance." A friend of hers commented underneath, "We are so sorry, sweetie. This is the saddest thing." Mallory replied with a single heart. On the 20th, my father posted a photograph of the church. The caption read, "A daughter has banned her parents from her own wedding. We have done nothing wrong but love her. If you have a moment, please pray for our family." His pastor's wife, not Reverend Calloway's wife, but a different woman, commented, "You have done everything right." I did not reply to any of them. I did not block any of them. I did not delete my own accounts. I read every comment. I read every share. I screenshotted the worst ones. I added them to the folder. Daniel watched me do this for 3 days. He did not say anything. He brought me sandwiches. He brought me water. He sat with his laptop open on the kitchen island in the morning and evening, working from home, never leaving me alone with my phone for more than an hour at a time. He was building something. I knew he was. I did not ask. On the night of February 21st, after I had gone to bed, he opened his laptop in my living room and typed one comment in the comment thread under Mallory's post in his own name, with his real face attached. It read, "Mallory, I have 312 text messages from you sent across 19 months asking me to leave Aurelia for you. I have 53 letters you've sent me that I have never answered. I have your Instagram account at lowcountry_sand_dollar_ saved on a thumb drive. I have your mother's screenshot of your phone wallpaper. I have not posted any of it publicly. I will not have to. I just need you to stop pretending you didn't say what you said at Valentine's dinner. Daniel." He closed the laptop. He came upstairs. He kissed my forehead and went to sleep. I woke up at 5:53 the next morning to a phone that had been buzzing without pause for hours. By the time I unplugged the charger and held it in my hand, I had 119 missed calls. They were from my mother, my father, Mallory, 3 aunts, an uncle, a cousin in Greenville, a cousin in Columbia, a great aunt in Beaufort, and the pastor whose wife had typed 3 praying hands emojis. I had 38 voicemails. I had 216 text messages. I had been tagged in 11 new posts. I did not listen to a single voicemail. I did not read a single text. I forwarded everything to the folder. Then I went downstairs. Daniel had made coffee. The sun was just beginning to come up over the back patio. The magnolia was bare and full of mockingbirds. I sat down across from him. I said, "All right." He said, "All right." Over the next 3 weeks, the storm I had braced for arrived. Reverend Calloway flew up to my parents' house for 2 long conversations and came back with a verdict. "Aurelia, those people are not telling the truth to themselves. I cannot help them be honest if they will not start." Mallory was admitted to a private wellness retreat for exhaustion, which our family had used as code for crisis for 30 years, and discharged after 11 days. My father called my office twice. I had the front desk take messages. My mother sent flowers to the foundation. I asked our office manager to please send them back. Caleb called me from Atlanta and confirmed again that he would do whatever I needed at the rehearsal dinner. Joanna Knox arrived in Charleston on the 11th of March with a small suitcase, 3 lemon-pound cakes, and a printed copy of Daniel's 16-page document, tabbed and color-coded. She hugged me on my porch and said, "I am so glad to know my future daughter. Now, what do we need?" By the morning of March the 13th, 2026, I was holding the boundary I had spent 3 weeks building. I drove to the Grand Magnolia Inn at 5:30 in the afternoon. The garden was lit with strings of small white lights. The dogwoods were beginning to bloom. Whitney was already inside, setting up her camera in the back corner of the dining room. Daniel met me on the porch. He took my hand. He said, "Are you ready?" I said, "Yes." We went inside. The dining room at the Grand Magnolia Inn was a long room with a coffered ceiling and a wall of windows that looked out over a small private garden. 60 guests were seated at 4 long tables dressed in white linen. The candles were lit. The first course had been served. Whitney's camera was on a tripod in the back corner. The inn's discreet projection screen had been pulled down behind the head table. The staff thought it was for a slideshow of childhood photos. My family had come. I had not banned them. Reverend Calloway had passed them the venue address 2 days earlier with one sentence: "If you want to be there, you may come. You will be seated. You will be welcomed. You will not be allowed to disrupt." My mother had arrived in pearl earrings and a blush silk blouse. My father had worn a navy suit. Mallory had come in a wine-colored dress with cap sleeves and a strand of fake pearls. She had been seated at the second table from the head, between 2 of my foundation colleagues who did not know her. She had smiled the entire walk-in. After the salad plates were cleared, Mallory rose for the maid of honor toast. She lifted her champagne flute. She tapped her fork against the glass. She smiled at me. She said, "I have known these 2 longer than anyone in this room, and there is nothing I have ever wanted more than to see my baby sister happy. Aurelia, you are the love of my life. Daniel, I am so glad you found her. May your marriage be everything you both deserve." She raised the glass. She turned to drink. The room raised its glasses to follow. Daniel did not lift his. He stood up, so did I. Daniel said, "Mallory, thank you." Before we drink to anything, Aurelia and I would like to share a few things with our family and our friends. We will be brief. We will not be unkind. We will not raise our voices. We will simply read. He picked up the iPad on the table beside him. The inn's projection screen lit up. The first image was a screen of text messages, dated November the 2nd, 2024, time-stamped between 11:17 p.m. and 1:28 a.m. The phone number at the top read, "Mallory, sister." Daniel read aloud. "Daniel, I know we shouldn't talk like this, but I trust you with my heart in a way I haven't with anyone in a long time. Mallory, November 2nd, 11:20 p.m. He waited a beat. "Daniel, I think there are moments my sister doesn't see you the way you deserve to be seen." Mallory, November 2nd, 12:56 a.m. Another beat. "Daniel, honestly, you'd be better off without her." Mallory, November 2nd, 1:28 a.m. The room did not breathe. Mallory said, the sing-song cool sister tone tightening, "Those are taken out of context. I was looking out for my sister. Daniel said, "There are 312 more." He tapped the iPad. The projection screen filled with a chronological timeline. 18 months of messages, each one ending with a variant of the same phrase. "You'd be better off without her." The timeline scrolled slowly. The room watched it scroll. My father set his water glass down on the table without picking it back up. My mother covered her mouth with her napkin. One of Mallory's cousins, 2 seats down from her, leaned away from her by a full inch without meaning to. Whitney clicked to the next slide. It was Mallory's Instagram alt account. The grid of 37 photographs of Daniel filled the screen. The pinned highlight reel was labeled K. A guest at the second table said audibly, "Oh my God." Whitney clicked again. It was a screenshot of Mallory's phone wallpaper, Daniel's headshot, then her lock screen, the wine glasses, and the caption, "Sometimes the right person is right under your sister's roof." The screen held for a long, slow count. Then Whitney clicked one more time. A small video appeared in the corner of the projection. Caleb Mercer was sitting in a small home office in Atlanta. He was wearing a button-down shirt. His hands were folded in front of him on a desk. He was tired and steady. He said, "Hi, Aurelia. Hi, Daniel. Hi, everyone. My name is Caleb Mercer. I was Aurelia's fiancé from August 2019 to June 2021. I broke off our engagement because I received text messages and edited photographs from a phone number I believed to be Aurelia's. I now know, and have known for some months, that those messages and that phone call came from Mallory Bellamy. I am sorry I did not know sooner. I am sorry I did not call Aurelia to confirm. I am here in this video because Aurelia asked me to tell you the truth one time, out loud, so it cannot be reshaped. I am sorry, Aurelia. I am so sorry, Daniel. Take very good care of her. I'm glad she found you." The video ended. The room was so quiet I could hear the candles. Mallory said, That's a manipulation." Whitney clicked one more time. It was a screenshot of a single text message sent from my mother's phone to Mallory's phone on the 14th of November, 2025. It read, Sweetheart, you deserve more than to watch your sister marry your favorite. I love you. We will figure this out together. Mom. My mother let out a sound that was not a word. The room stayed silent. Mallory broke first. She turned to my mother. She said, Mom! Mom, tell them. Mom, please. Her voice rose into a register I had only heard once before in my life, the year I was 15, and she had broken her ankle at a sleepover. She lunged for the projection cable that ran along the head table. Daniel did not move. Joanna Knox stood up calmly from the third table, placed herself between Mallory and the equipment, and said in the same low, slow voice her son had inherited, No, sweetheart, sit down. Mallory sat down. The room exhaled. I stood up. I did not need a microphone. The inn was old and small. I said, I want my family to know something. I did not ban you from this rehearsal dinner. I did not ban you from my wedding tomorrow. You came, you sat down, you ate the salad. You raised your glass. We have not exiled you. You have exiled yourselves. By the work it took to get you to this room without you being able to control the script, you have shown me what the rest of my life with you would look like. I will not pretend not to have seen it. I will not return to it. I will not litigate any of this in public. I have a civil order being filed Monday morning, Mallory. It will be specific and it will be enforced. To my parents, you will hear from Reverend Calloway and not from me. Tonight, this room is for my fiancé, for my friends, for Daniel's mother, and for the people in our families who chose to be witnesses. The rest of you are free to leave whenever you wish. Nobody moved for a long moment. Then my mother stood up very slowly and walked out without a word. My father followed. Mallory stood up last. She looked back at me with an expression I had never seen on her face. It was not anger, it was not regret. It was something almost like recognition, like she was seeing me for the first time. Then she turned around and walked out into the garden. The rehearsal dinner continued for another 40 minutes. The soup was served. Joanna gave a small toast that made everyone cry. She said only, To my son and to my new daughter, who is one of the bravest women I have ever met. May the rest of your life be as steady as the way you got here. Whitney moved her camera back to the joyful side of the room. My college roommate told a story about me sleeping through a fire alarm in our dorm, and everyone laughed in the way only people who love you laugh at your worst night. The waitstaff brought out the dessert. The candles burned down. We did not say my sister's name again. We did not need to. Before I close out this story, I want to say one thing for the people listening. If you have ever stood at a table full of people you loved and watched none of them speak up for you, please drop a small heart in the comments. We don't need to be loud to be heard. We just need to know we are not the only one who has stood at that table. We were married the next morning at 11 in the small chapel adjacent to the Grand Magnolia Inn. The dogwoods were beginning to open. Whitney took the photographs. Reverend Otis Calloway officiated. Joanna Knox walked me down the aisle because I had asked her to. Daniel cried. So did I. There were 43 guests. None of them were Bellamy's. A bouquet of white tulips arrived at our hotel suite that afternoon with a card that read, Aurelia and Daniel. I have a long, ordinary life now because you made me brave enough to admit 5 years too late that I had been lied to. Be brave together. Yours, Caleb. I cried again. I cried clean tears. I let Daniel hold me. On Monday, March the 16th, I filed the civil order of protection from harassment in Charleston County Family Court. The clerk asked me gently, "Is the respondent a relative?" I said, "Yes, my older sister." She nodded the way clerks nod when they have seen this paperwork too often. The order was granted by the end of the week. Reverend Calloway met with my parents twice that spring. He told me, in his soft and steady voice, "Aurelia, they are not ready to be honest yet. They may never be. But the door does not have to close all the way. It can stay slightly ajar and unlocked. That is your call, not theirs." I have not 6 weeks after the wedding talked to my mother or my father or my sister. I have not blocked them on any platform. I have left the door, in Reverend Calloway's words, slightly ajar. I have not held it open. I will not hold it open. They will have to push it themselves, with both hands, in daylight, with the truth in their mouths. If they ever do, I will sit with them. If they never do, I will live with that. Daniel and I bought a small bungalow in Hampton Park, 2 blocks from the playground he designed. We have a dog named Pepper who follows me to the kitchen at the same time every morning. We have a magnolia in the back patio that is starting to bud again. We have a routine. We have a marriage. I have a long, ordinary life. Whitney moved her studio to a storefront on King Street last month and gave me the first photograph from the wedding morning. Daniel laughing on the porch of the inn before he saw me. In a small wooden frame I keep on my office desk. Caleb sends a Christmas card every year now. He signs it simply, "Wishing you a long, ordinary life. C." Joanna Knox calls me every other Sunday. We are quiet on the phone the way mothers and daughters can be. She does not ask about my parents. I do not bring them up. I did not get here by being loud. I got here by being patient and by marrying the only person in my family, chosen or born, who knew from the first text message who he was and who I was and what we were doing. I got here, too, by trusting the small instinct that had been trying to tell me since I was 8 years old at a kitchen island that being easy was a story other people needed me to keep telling. To anyone listening who is still in the middle of this story, a quiet life is not a small life. A boundary is not a weapon. The people who love you do not need you to be easy. And the ones who require you to be easy were never loving you at all. They were loving the version of you who would not look up from the plate. Look up